Okay, let's continue on with the price gouging case. Uh, except this time we're going to ask yet another type of question. We want to know whether anybody is being harmed in this situation. We've got our seller here pricing the water at $20. They know that there are plenty of thirsty people, some of whom have sufficient funds to swap for the water. A lot of other people thirsty also, but don't have enough cash to make the purchase. The question we want to ask then is, are these two being harmed by the seller? So when the seller sells to these two down here and not to them, are these two being harmed? You can imagine there might be some debate about that. Reasonable people might want to say yes, they're being harmed, or no, they're not being harmed. And again, if there's disagreement about these situations, we want to think of this in terms of the different frames that we bring to a scenario like this. So two people can see this same scenario and come to different conclusions about whether somebody is or is not being harmed. And if it's not the seller harming these two, what about the entire system? Are these two, who don't have a lot of money, being harmed by the entire sort of market exchange system? All right, suppose we say, nope, nobody is being harmed. Okay, so in this scenario, nobody is being harmed. Right? Now, you can still grant that there are some thirsty people not going to get some water. These two started out thirsty, and they're going to stay thirsty. These two started thirsty, now they're going to have their thirst quenched with some water. But just because they remain thirsty in this view, it doesn't mean that they were harmed by the seller. Right? So if you take the position that there's no harm involved here, right, you can still recognize that there's a need, an unmet need, but that it just doesn't rise to the level of a moral judgment that one party harmed another party. Now, another way to look at this type of argument, the no harm argument here, is thinking about sort of what we might call market norms. And here the argument here is that market norms are crowding out or sort of trumping certain moral concerns. And the suggestion here is that, you see, this selling of the water for $20 is normative. It is the normal thing to do in a market situation, right? I mean, if this, just to look at it as sort of a business practice, this is pretty smart. Mm-hmm. That's the norm of these market exchanges, is that you want to try to get the highest price you can for your goods, right? The best possible deal. And if these two are willing to pay it, well, then you're both better off. So from this view, we would say that if that is the market norm, then if you say there's no harm in that scenario, you're sort of suggesting that the market norms are taking precedence. They're being prioritized over what might be other moral concerns. What's the other moral concern? Oh, well, these two don't get any water, right? So we might think that, okay, these two are in need, and that it's sort of just somehow at some level a bad thing that they don't get what they need. They need water desperately. But if we say there's no harm going on, one way to look at that is to say that we cannot criticize this individual for making this transaction and not that transaction, because they are engaging in normative behavior, meaning behavior that is understood to be proper in the realm of market interactions, right? Well, you can see a possible criticism here, right? The criticism would be, well, wait a second. This individual didn't have to sell the water for $20. Could have sold it for $2. Or maybe three to these two down here and 2 to these two over here, right? And so if you take that view, that maybe the seller is harming these two, you might take that view because you might think that the seller could have changed their price, right? Could have sold the water at a lower price so as to meet the needs of more people in the community, not just those with sufficient money. Okay, so you can see then how there might be disagreement about this situation. But one of the defenses for the seller, for those who would say there's no harm here, is the idea that this is acceptable business practice in market transactions in general. And if you think like that, then we're going to say that you're taking a position that market norms are trumping or crowding out certain moral concerns, like the thirst of the other two individuals. That type of argument, we're going to call it system justifying. Because what this system justifying arguments are arguments about the social situation where you're kind of saying that the arrangement is okay as it is. Nothing needs to be changed, or we don't have to penalize anybody, right? More specifically here, system justifying claims, these are arguments that support the status quo. Okay? If the seller is not harming the thirsty people, then there's no justification for penalizing them. So we're not going to come to this person and say, oh, we're going to lock you up or put you in jail. We're going to fine you or whatever, right? So if we say there's no harm here, then you're sort of giving a system justifying argument for this scenario, that it is permissible for this interaction to happen, even though these two are still thirsty. Alternatively, as we've seen, we might make price gouging illegal and impose penalties on this behavior because we do not accept a system in which people profit from another's misfortune. So we might want to say, no good. This person cannot sell the water for these inflated prices, taking advantage of the people in desperate need here. In fact, from this point of view, even these people here are being taken advantage of, right? They have to pay an exorbitant price for something they could have gotten, much cheaper just the day before the emergency. So we might want to say this person is doing something wrong, and we're going to prohibit that behavior. We're going to penalize them or put a fine on them or put them in jail. We're going to make price gouging illegal. So let's take a step back here. What do we have going on here in the case of price gouging? On the one hand, you might want to say that the market system is a non-moral system. There is no fair price for any good in a market system. The price is whatever people are willing to pay. And if that excludes some individuals from the transaction, well, that's just the system. From this point of view, it's improper to bring any kind of moral criticism to this individual here. There is no fair price for water. Another angle on that same kind of idea is you might say that the role, just being an economic actor here, is protecting the individual from criticism, right? They are simply being a seller, providing goods to people who are willing to pay. And the role as a seller here is protecting them from any criticism. The thirst of these two cannot be used to criticize the seller in this case. Or we might take another stance, that taking advantage of another's misfortune is wrong. It's morally wrong. What kind of person does this, right? Where's the concern for the community? So we might want to blame this individual for causing harm. What kind of person does this? You got a whole bunch of people in need, and this person's going to profit from the misfortune of others, and in fact, in a sense, deny some what they are supplying to others, right? Who does that? And how is this sort of community-oriented thinking? Where's the view, hey, I want to help my fellow citizens or community members, right? So we can either see this as a situation where it is improper to place moral blame on this individual or to judge them harshly, or we could see this as a situation where this individual is acting in some kind of morally deficient manner. Following up on that second view, you see the folks who want to level blame at this individual might say, well, yes, they're allowed to sell the water for $20 maybe, but after all, they could say to themselves, but I'm not going to. I feel the suffering of my fellow citizens, and so they reduce the price to $2. So it raises this question. What is this person? Is this person just an economic actor only, right? Or can we expect them to empathize with other individuals in the market system? What are the expectations for market players? And it has important moral consequences, how we view the situation. Right, so from this point of view, then, empathy, if the seller feels empathy for the thirsty people and lowers the price to $2, well, that's promoting the welfare. Right? You're helping out even the people with only $2. And what about freedom? Well, the folks with $2 now, they can participate in the market. They have enough to buy much needed water. And the freedom here in this case then would be freedom from thirst. Of course, they're free now to participate because they got enough money, but they're also then in another kind of freedom. They're free from this debilitating state, which is a kind of freedom that you often hear emphasized in people on the left of the political spectrum, whereas people on the right of the political spectrum tend to emphasize the freedom to engage in these transactions. The people on the left, the political spectrum, tend to emphasize, or at least also see that, well, these folks are not free. They're not free from thirst, right? They're not free to engage in the market because they don't have enough money, and they're not free from their thirst. They can't satisfy their thirst. So, if we take a look generally at some of the issues involved here, here's our seller, right? And if we think about markets, the market has certain rules and permissible actions, right? But this person might think, I am not only a market participant. I am also a citizen, a community member, neighbor, with moral concerns and obligations. So when we think about people engaging in market transactions, do we want to have a narrow view of their moral obligations, in which, as we've seen, in other words, they wouldn't have any obligation to satisfy a whole bunch of other thirsty people who don't have enough money? Or do we want to say that they do have obligations to other people? So we can think of this as sort of metaphorically, or just as a way of conceptualizing this. Here we have, people, we are situated in our communities. We are neighbors, we're community members, we're citizens, we've got family members, we've got friends, and we have all kinds of moral obligations and concerns. We don't want to be harming people. We want to be fair to people. And so we are concerned about our moral standing in the community. But then the question is, when you take on the role as an economic actor, what happens to those moral concerns? Do we sort of just let them drop away, right? So when you're in the market playing field, is it okay now to not be concerned about those other thirsty people and the people who didn't have enough money to pay your price, right? And if that's the case, how is it that these moral concerns can just drop away when we become a market player? After all, aren't you the same person? You're a citizen, you're a community member, a neighbor, right, with these moral concerns. But why is it then that in the market sphere that these other moral concerns either get trumped or drop away? And so this is a difficult issue and a deep issue.